Okay, well, I have the honor of introducing you today because we have Carrie, who is en route to work at the hospital, and Scott, who is today. So we're excited to welcome Ferdy. I think we've been trying to get you to come and present a CareTC seminar since you started, so we're happy to have you. Ferdy is an assistant professor in the Department of Global Health and co-chair of the DEI DGH committee. His research career has evolved around understanding the dynamics and complexities of retention and care and adherence to antiretroviral medication among people living with HIV. So we're excited to have you present, and welcome.
Thank you so much, and I'm really excited to be here. And as you heard, my work is around understanding the dynamics around antiretroviral therapy, the adherence thereof, and I think that understanding it as a dynamics is the best way of looking at it, because there are so many factors that play in this arena, and at different levels, individual, interpersonal. Looking at the social ecological model, and the factors exist at all these three levels. But today I'm going to be looking at one aspect that unfortunately has really received very little attention, but which is a very integral part of our being. And if you look at the wellness wheel, religiosity or spirituality is one of those very important components for somebody to be considered whole or well. And there is that component of that. And it also trickles them into antiretroviral therapy adherence because of that component. And how does it also impact your adherence to medication or not? Your spiritual aspect. And for some of us, and I speak for most Africans, spirituality is a huge part of themselves, as we're going to see in this in this presentation. So in South Africa, let's just look at the religious landscape where this study is based. In 2022, 85.3% of the South Africans population identified as Christians. Now there are other religions. So you likely say that almost 99 to 98% are attached spiritually to a denomination. Because we are having 85% only identifying as Christians. So there are other religions. So Christianity or spirituality is a huge part of an African's lifespan. And now, when I was looking at this work, it really troubled me a little bit. I didn't see how spirituality was considered in somebody's journey. And a journey, I call it, because antiretroviral therapy is a journey, it's a life's journey. Once you're diagnosed, that's it. We don't yet have a cure, but we can manage it. And so that is an integral part of somebody's being, where they have to adhere to a medication for life. And so how does their spiritual part also interplay with how they perceive this medication or they perceive this new journey that they will be taking on? It was really critically missing in the literature. And then I thought, hey, even though you don't have any money, funding, why don't you look at this? And so I've been putting this work together with definitely no funding and probably part of my salary to make sure that it starts off somehow. There are three mainstream Christian denominations in South Africa, which are of the 85.3%. Of course, there are others, smaller ones, but these are the three main. And we have Pentecostal churches, which are the most recent ones, African-initiated churches. And these are churches that came from the colonial times, but then Africans have kind of made it their own in terms of bringing the Africanness more into what they have learned. And so they've kind of owned it. and then brought in their spirituality, African spirituality into it. But then you also have the Orthodox churches like the Catholic Church that have stayed true to their dogma right from the colonial days. So those are the three main. But of these three, the Pentecostal churches is the huge bit of them. So we have Catholicism, that is one of the main Christian landscape. In South Africa, we have Protestantism and we have Pentecostalism, which is where we are going to be focused on in this study, and definitely for that reason. Now, before I continue with the presentation, I definitely have three disclaimers. Number one, I'm not here to preach Christianity to anyone or convert anyone to any Christianity. It's just about, it's a scientific endeavor. Number two, this is still a work in progress. And so it's not a final product that you are going to be seeing at the end of it, but it's a process that we are going through, and probably we'll get to where we are at this moment. And so we have looked at this, and then before we move on, what are the main tenets of a Pentecostal belief? Because that's where we can start off to understand how it impacts somebody's behavior in terms of antiretroviral therapy adherence. So the tenets that you see here, remember that Pentecostalism fall within the bigger ambit of Christianity. And so there are definitely some beliefs that will be shared amongst them. And these ones are the key ones that are shared amongst the five or the three main religions that are shared. The belief in the gift of the Holy Spirit and healing through the Holy Spirit. There is also, what is also common among these three religious beliefs is commitment to sharing faith with non-believers. In other words, evangelism, convertism. That is, the goal is to try to convert somebody else, or not the goal, but it is expected of you. It's one of the it's one of the duties as a Christian to also bring other people along with you in the Christian journey, because others are considered to have fallen off. And it is your role or your duty as a Christian to bring them onto the path of the righteousness. So that is also shared amongst them, all of this tradition. And then there is an emphasis on evil spirit, meaning that HIV is basically perceived as an evil spirit and not a germ, as it is. So that's why I'm saying that it's an important part of our lives that is really important in adherence, which we are missing. And then also there is an emphasis on Christ as the lone path to salvation, Jesus Christ. And like I said, this is the disclaimer. I'm not here to proclaim Christ, but just to bring a spiritual journey to what we're doing. And then there's also a belief in divine healing of illnesses or injuries, which then has a direct impact on whether people take antiretroviral treatment or not, especially Christians. And in a population that is 85% Christian and having a huge HIV pandemic, so you now see how their Christian belief has a huge role to play on their adherence journey. But funny enough, it's not really looked at in the literature or in science. I'm not sure why, whether religion is separated, but a full human being has a religious or a spiritual side, which has to be considered. So what I'm putting now up are those tenets that are really focused on Pentecostal church. So these are Pentecostal beliefs that are really stuck onto them, and a literal reading of the Bible. So contrary to the Catholic Church, where a priest stands up and reads the Bible to the entire church, they are encouraged as Christians to read their own Bibles and be able to understand it by themselves and not only rely on the pastor or the clergy to share what is there to them. And secondly, they believe in the possibility of direct divine revelation, that God can speak to you directly, can give you directions on what to do and where to go and how to do things. And also believe in miracles, that it still occurs today as it were in the days of the Bible. And so people who are on antiretroviral therapy are likely to drop their medication and 10 to prayers because they believe miraculously they can still be healed as it were in the days of the Bible, and believe in divine healing of injuries and sickness, as we have mentioned. I've probably skipped one. So these are some of the versions that you will see of Pentecostal church services, and it depends on the area. If it's more a city-based environment, then you'll be having mega church buildings, as in the fourth one, and in more local and poor or resource deficient areas, you would have tent services, as it is in the first one, or in classrooms where they would go and borrow classrooms because during the weekends there are no classes. They would definitely go and ask, can we use your classes or for church services on a Sundays because there are no schools. And then for the middle income, I would say, areas, you would definitely have halls that are rented usually for church services during the week and also on Sundays. And of course, I've mentioned in bigger cities, you have mega building services as it is. But these are the different forms that you
When
see.
you said it's the large percentage of the Christian faith in South Africa, do you know what proportion when you say, so is it of the 85%? Is it 70% or Pentecostal? Do you have a sense about that?
Yes, of course. I actually didn't put that in. I intended to bet about 60%.
60.
Yes,
Okay.
because recently Pentecostal faith has been growing over leaps and bounds, and most people from the Orthodox and even from the African settings are actually drilling towards moving towards Pentecostal churches. And as we can see written here, the rise of African prophets, because most of the people heading these churches are called prophets, wielding unchecked power in Pentecostal churches. Meaning that when we talk about power, it's not political power, but the power to convince people and to influence their way of thinking, their way of looking at things, their way of behaving, and which also trickles down in their way of perceiving health in general. And so they are very convincing to tell you that you don't need antiretroviral therapy, but that God can heal you. So they have the power that he is describing as unchecked. So, and then we even have that going further, that churches, actually meaning Pentecostal churches, are taking advantage of the poor. And they have to account for that. So it's now even something that it's been considered problematic by some other politicians now, and even in the health arena. And so because of the beliefs of healing and all this mysticism that can be applied to heal someone and to get them miraculously delivered from a sickness, or the fact that sickness is considered demonic, then you now have these ritualistic practices that are there. There is a belief that the snake is the original devil, I guess. From the original times, snakes brought in sin into the world. And so in order to remove that sin, you introduced snake into them. And then, so there are all these very variable beliefs and rituals that you probably see. You have wild prayer sessions, as you do see here. And then all the practices where the pastor will say, rather than take medications, God has ordered me that if you go out and eat this grass, you're going to be cleansed of all your sins. And some others literally spray, this is an insecticide that they were using on the church members. And the belief is that using these ornaments and other practices can actually deliver them from their sicknesses and their disease and devil. You do not need medication from the white man. And so, in this background now leads us to, and so I found this very problematic that in the extant literature it's not even considered when it is an integral part of the people. And maybe we've sat here and we're studying all these mystical reasons why people are not adhering to their medication when it might just all come down to spirituality. And it's a sensitive thing that somebody might not openly talk to you about. You can ask them, why are you not taking your medication? I forgot. It's a very easy excuse to give. I forgot to take it. But meanwhile, they probably didn't forget. their prophet told them that taking it is it's not good, that it's of no use, that come prayer, and if you have faith, you will be healed. But then it's easy to tell you, the healthcare provider, I forgot. And then you publish your article saying that forgetfulness is one of the reasons why people don't adhere to their medication. Is it? Is the question. Did they forget? No, maybe not. Maybe it's their belief that is driving them to tell you that they forgot, because telling you I forgot is a very easy excuse, because you cannot kind of punish me for forgetting something, because we all forget, I think so. So we now went into the aim of the study. I've gathered a team, and the first author there is a PhD student that I'm supervising in South Africa. When this thought came to my head, and because I wanted to do it in South Africa, I came up and found this person who graciously agreed to do it without any funding and probably relying on my little salary to let's see how this thing starts off. And we started off looking at publishing just the protocol and looking at the role of religious beliefs in adherence in the Cape Town metropole in South Africa. And so I decided to use the community health systems framework, because it is about the community, the church. Faith organizations are an integral part of the community. It is part, in fact, we have seen the different church services that are held all the time, sometimes every day in the week. So at least every denomination has 2 to 3 services a week. Sometimes they have midweek services. They would have all-night prayers, vigils. They would have fasting and prayer sessions for about 21 days. That is kind of obligatory for everybody. And so it's part of the community. And it also, this framework is suggesting that those practices have an impact on the health systems and how the health systems also operate. I think I designed this framework when I was looking at some other, the community health worker as central to the functioning of the community health system. So that's why you see at this very center is a community health worker. But I just thought the framework was also useful here, because people also practice alternative and complementary medicine, like spiritual healers, of course, and which I would consider these religious believers to also be part of the alternative healers and traditional healers as well. And funny enough, some people blend this spiritual one with the traditional one and the conventional medicine. They will blend all three to see what results comes up. It's like an amalgamation of 3 different components.
Are there significant variabilities around, sorry, actually, I should have asked. Do you want questions at the end?
No, go ahead at any time. I should have mentioned that, and you can interrupt, yeah.
Are there significant variabilities among Pentecostal practices that make it hard to study because of the variability around some of these more ritualistic practices? And a lack of whereas Catholicism, there's the Pope and there's a decree and the rules, know, and so but the decentralized nature of kind of these local pastors and their power, make that a challenge.
Yeah, actually not. Of course, there will be variabilities, but those central tenets that are shared are definitely something that runs across. However, it is not all of them who would do the ritualistic practices like and in fact, some of them will condemn those who are doing those ritualistic practices, and there are even all other horrific ritualistic practices that, for the sake of science, are not meant to be projected here because they're of very sensitive nature. But other Pentecostal pastors will definitely not be happy with this. And so the conceptualization of the study then is focused around those tenets that are shared across them and not the variabilities that you see that are kind of outliers, I would call them. And so we started off the study in a meaningful way to look at what the literature is talking about, the relationship between medication adherence and retention in care, and adherence to antiretroviral treatment. And then phase 2, we decided to conduct 3 qualitative studies. And the reason for this, I only focus on qualitative studies, is because when we did the scoping review, we found that the quantitative evidence was really variable. Some of them we say there is a relationship between religiosity or Christianity and antiretroviral treatment. Others will say there is not. And so there was that variability. And so we just thought that there is no need to. And one of the reasons why it was difficult to even pull them to even get the significance of whatever differences that exist or the relationship, the methodologies that were applied were really varied. So it was impossible to pull them up in a systematic review with meta-analysis. And so opted therefore to do qualitative research, which is, I'm considering this as foundation studies, because we plan now to, based on this, design guidelines that then can be tested now using RCTs, the facilities that follow the guideline and those that don't, and does it make a difference in the adherence? But that is still down the line. If this formative work produce something that we can write a grant and be fundable, then I think that that's the future direction we plan to go into. So the first one is to, we want to look at them in phase 2. Phase 1 is completed. Now we are in phase 2, and is to identify Pentecostal religious leaders' beliefs and practices that influence art and hearing. So we're looking now at these religious leaders, these prophets, these pastors, these evangelists, as the names vary. And we plan to apply a descriptive, explorative study approach there. And then secondly, we want to look at now the people at the center of all this, which is the Christians themselves. And so we plan to do an interpretive phenomenological analysis. This basically means that this is focused on the people who, phenomenology is about the people who have experienced the phenomenon, at the experience, at the center of it. So phenomenological study is that there is a phenomenon, and for you to be part of that study, you must have experienced that phenomenon, meaning that you must be HIV positive, HIV, you must be a Christian, Pentecostal, you must be going to church services, you must be involved in prayer and fasting. So then that is when a phenomenological study becomes relevant to you, because you have gone through the phenomenon or you are experiencing it. And then we also now want to do another qualitative research approach, a constructivist approach. Now, constructivist is about learning, and the constructivist approach we want to use now for the healthcare providers. And the constructivist approach is somebody who is exposed to a phenomenon, but is not directly influenced by it, but then they have interest in learning how that works. So constructivism is about how do people make sense of the things that they learn. And so that's why this approach is useful now for healthcare workers, because they know, they're also Christians themselves, and they know that this also has an influence on how people take their medication. And so the third phase is now to develop a guideline to look at that. So this one we've not yet gotten there at all. So this is the phase 1 exploratory review that we did. These are some of the central Pentecostal beliefs that we saw that were relevant. So in A, we have religious beliefs that act as barriers to adherence to art. So belief in the healing power of God, which we saw that were very relevant to the tenets of Pentecostal churches. Belief in the healing through prayers, belief in faith healing or taking steps towards faith. So faith is like, okay, I'm just going to believe that God is going to take this disease away, and I'm not going to do anything, because if you take the medication, it's considered unbelief, because you're doing something else to address the problem. If you're doing something else to address the problem, how then do you want God to intervene when you're already doing something towards it? So we also therefore have behaviors that probably would facilitate it. Believe believe that God gave scientists the supernatural power to make art. So that's another perspective of it. And so it's all about the interpretation, right? How you interpret the scriptures, and the belief that someone can become HIV positive if God allows it to happen.
So is this just another question? Are the when you get down to that, is the idea that it would be guidelines for health workers who have patients that are Pentecostals and how they would to better communicate with them.
Absolutely.
With them. Is that where that intervention
That
point
intervention
would be?
point is, we are looking at exploring that as one, and also the local pastors. We also want to really have this educational level of things and probably drive this message of probably God has made science, given scientists the power to make art as important things for them to understand. And incorporate in their messages. So basically, he's making them partners towards helping these people living with HIV within their communities. After all that, we came up with this conceptualization that you have your Pentecostalism. This is the positive aspect that we decided to look into because our goal is to develop a guideline. And so communicating with God for spiritual upliftment, see? So rather than being depressed and all that, we look at that communicating with God will probably lead to spiritual upliftment, access to social support, because some people disclose to their Christian communities, access to motivational teachings from the pastors, and religious activities such as prayers and scripture reading can also help in uplifting. And what that does is that it will lead to better coping with depression, being less stressed, and having less anxiety. As the mediator, and of course, social coping, which better coping with stigma and discrimination that comes with it, disclosing one's HIV to other church members, and coping with the side effects of art. So we think that this one, or we're hypothesizing that this will lead to improved adherence to art and consequently better adherence to their religious beliefs, which we think is an integral part of who they are as humans. So, and then this one is under consideration for publication in the health policy and systems. It's about the beliefs of the Pentecostal pastors now. These are now the church leaders towards HIV. And what is funny is that it's a reflection of what the Christians also think. So again, it tallies with their spiritual belief that every disease is demonic. And so you interview these people and then they tell you every disease is demonic. And so we think that these are probably negative thoughts that they have, or negative beliefs that emanates from their spiritual belief that every disease is demonic. And most of the people who are also, and then poor knowledge on HIV, that is even one of the problems. We're thinking that in our framework, educating them of what HIV is, how it is transmitted, and how it might dispel the whole idea of demonizing HIV and might change their approach towards managing it. Because thinking that is demonic, definitely they will not consider antiretroviral therapy as a positive way of addressing demonic attacks, so to say. They would think that it would definitely have to happen through prayers and otherwise. And ignorance about art. They don't even know what antiretroviral therapy is. I would say no. We asked them if they've ever heard about antiretroviral therapy. He said, I would say no. It's the first time to hear about art. So if somebody who is guiding Christians who are living with HIV doesn't have an idea about art, how can they help them to even be adherent?
Is there any data around what the percentage of people, what's the prevalence rate among the Pentecostal community is compared to the national prevalence rate?
I looked at that data. It definitely wasn't existing, and I'm thinking that even moving forward in the study, it's probably some of the groundwork that I would probably plan to explore quantitatively to see, even to pull up the folders. I think that they also ask within their patient record if you're Christian or not. Obviously, a lot of people say Christian if they are not atheist, I believe, but not really active as in going to church and attending these services. But that's another story within it. And then they also believe now in God's healing power. So whatever disease you have, in my opinion, God can heal any disease. And in my opinion, any means including HIV. And so they would definitely say no disease is too hard or too difficult for God, including HIV. And so this is the message he is going to stand on the pulpit and share with the Christians who are living with HIV as well within the community. And so they will go to the healthcare provider, they will collect the medication just because they have to take their meds, but they can go and keep it at home because they believe their prophet has said God is going to heal them. Healing through prayers, of course. And this one even says in the Bible. Now, this is somebody who probably practices part of the mysticism. He says in the Bible, you can check. People like Peter and John in the Bible, they used handkerchiefs. And in the story in the Bible is that Paul was preaching and he was using handkerchief to preach. After finished preaching, he was using it, of course, to wipe his body. This is the biblical story. And then now, during his preaching, now after the preaching, there were people who were sick in the population. So he just used the handkerchief and touched them and all they became healed. And so because of that biblical story now, that's why he's linking it. And so to him, if a handkerchief can heal people, why not spray them? Why not ask them to eat grass? Why not ask them to eat snakes?
I was just gonna ask, like you mentioned earlier that a lot of these, you don't call them pastors, what did
Yeah.
or these pastors,
Or religious leaders.
they're consolidating a lot of power.
Yeah.
I think that's also part of it, them wanting to keep that kind of influence that they have over the people.
Yeah.
And so they stay kind of willfully ignorant of this stuff.
Yeah, it's all that. Yeah, it's all that because they want to wield a lot of power. And again, like you see in one of the one of the aspects I said that they focused more on the poor community. That is where they go and settle more because now this is an exploitable population. Why are you laughing?
No, I was just telling you earlier that these things are complex and has to do with socioeconomic status.
Exactly.
Yeah. But again, like we have a case in Kenya where a professor by engineering, a guy who understands this thing, this is a very big church. And part of his initial movement was to tell people that I'll heal you of your HIV. With some senior doctors, professionals, so it's complex that.
That's exactly what we're trying to say. And so we being all the scientists and only looking at our antiretroviral treatment and how it works and ignoring this religious side and the complex social aspect of it is probably why we are still where we are. And every day we are shifting these goals from 19 to 95, 95, 95, and not really understanding the complexity of things. We go and sit in these big offices and you don't talk to the people on the ground, these people who are involved in these things. Yeah. We should stop doing only p-values and confidence intervals. So now these pastors look at now this is the positive influence of some of the pastors. These are their perspectives. Valorizing healthcare providers. We believe that doctors are also chosen people to help. So according to them, they are chosen by God. And so they have a role to play. The healthcare providers also have a role to play. And then he also says that God values medication. So definitely he's saying that this also tells me that God can use even medication. You see, a positive spin on it. This one is saying if God can use handkerchiefs, to heal other people, why then can he not use medication to also heal people? So I think that the whole goal here is for us to use this positive aspect and embellish it and then drive it in educational programs amongst these people as an intervention. And try to dispel some of the negative connotation. And then, of course, HIV literacy. There are some of them who really know what's going on. He says, I believe that HIV is transmitted in different ways, but there is the main way that HIV and AIDS are transmitted during sexual intercourse. Some of them are really aware that it's not demonic, as others do share, but that this is a disease caused by a germ and that we can deal with this using medication. And then this is now a spiritual perspective of it, that the soul needs a healthy body. So in that way, use your medication to treat yourself so that your body is healthy, so that your soul can dwell in a healthy body. That's another pastor who said that in he's 35. And another one says integrating medication and prayers. So somebody said, you don't have to dish your medication for prayers. Why? You can be praying that God help you or heal you, while at the same time taking your medication. And then in our second phase, I'm almost getting to the end. We now looked at now the the patients themselves. This is the phenomenological study. And this is still, the analysis of this is still going on. So what I'm sharing here is really, really preliminary. But some of them say that I just follow my pastor's directives, talking now about the power again. So they don't really care what their healthcare provider says or nurse. If the pastor says we are going on 30 days fasting, no eating, no drinking, that's what we're doing. And so I'm not taking my medication. So when he says I must stop, that's the medication. I am going to believe him because he says God will heal me.
They all male.
Are they all-
You said he's, I was just wondering if by nature.
Well, no, he
Are
considers
they all?
God as male.
No.
He considers God as male.
It's two questions, both sides, I suppose,
Yeah.
perception about it.
Mm.
For leaders, for the Pentecostal leaders, are they mostly primarily male?
Male, yeah.
Yeah.
But in my sharing here, there are also females. I think that they're not.
Okay.
No, when I was doing my analysis, as a social scientist, I like representativeness.
Yeah.
So I target the female
Okay.
pastors as well
Okay.
for their perspective to be included.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this one says spiritual fasting and prayer. As a Christian, I must, and there must be time for fasting for days. See, I was telling you about. And like you must not drink or eat water and so forth. So within this time, they don't take their antiretroviral therapy because it's a spiritual journey. And then you go and find that their viral loads is very high. You're thinking, oh, this person is non-adherent. That's how we classify them, non-adherent, adherent, and that's the end of the story. Yes.
Sorry, is that specific to Pentecostal?
Very,
Yes.
they have a huge fasting culture.
Yeah, because I'm not very familiar with Christianity. I'm
Yeah.
not Christian, but like, you know, in America,
Hmm.
a lot of Christians.
Yeah,
Because I
that's
don't
why I said
think
that if you're not practicing, if you're not an atheist, you just say you're a Christian.
Yeah, because I don't know that there's not a lot of Christians in the US, I know fast. It's not like a big thing here.
Is it around
so-
a specific holiday or is it just all throughout? the
Just
year?
all year, if the pastor can come tomorrow and say that God has given me the revelation that we have to fast for a week, and that's
Some
it.
of them like the periodic, like some
Christmas
wakes
season.
up and says that
Yeah.
So it's,
something has happened, so we need to start fasting,
Fasting.
right? There's no consultation, like it's not like a calendar thing.
And how long, how long?
21 days, 7 days.
Because I remember in my country, last year, so many people died because of fasting.
Yeah.
Like, is it
Over 400 people
during
died.
daylight or all fasting?
24 hours.
24
24, and fasting 24 hours for days. So like 72 hours fasting. You've not eaten anything, you drank water.
oh, that's,
Yeah. I've done that a lot of times
so,
as a practicing Christian.
so it's specific to the Pentecostal denomination?
Not specific, but they are very pedantic about it.
Oh,
They are very into this is what God has said we should do, and we're doing it.
There are no, I would say Protestant practices around fasting. There's like Lent where you stop eating,
There
you
we
might choose
go.
something, like stop
Mhm.
eating, but in terms of broader Christianity, there is not
Not-
like a,
There we
you
go.
know, there's not a,
So
I think Ramadan or like Muslim,
yeah,
practice around fasting for Ramadan, but that's again is like just during the daylight periods
Mhm.
and not during it.
no, Christians they hate it. Right. And so
This group, Pentecostal.
There we
Sorry,
go,
just making sure.
Pentecostal. And that is why it was a group of interest for this study, because they are the extremists of Christians. And let me use that word, the extremists.
Okay.
So if it is said in the Bible that Jesus fasted for 30 days and 30 nights, that's what they're gonna do.
Okay.
It's written there. So it's a practice also around Christmas, New Year. The belief is that you have to do that to prepare yourself spiritually to get into the new year. Cleanse yourself of every bad omen in the old year. And so usually towards the new year, you have a lot of churches practicing long fasting periods of 21 days, 30 days as a preparation of moving into the new year.
I wasn't blaming, I just don't know much about it, so.
I just wanted to say that I've had a couple of experiences of a patient on antiretroviral medication interrupting their treatment almost every month. Because maybe every month they have like 3 days fasting into the month, 5 days fasting into the month, either at the beginning of the month
Or
or
the
at
end
the
of the
end
month.
of the month. So if you do not really know their belief and you counsel them about taking your medication, even though you are fasting, maybe a banana or two.
Mhm.
Most of them will not take their
Will not do that.
medication. And we also have experiences when you have this prophet coming into the city
Mhm.
for a crusade.
Visiting pastors or visiting prophets.
Prophets for a crusade. You see, many of the clients will come in demanding for medical certificate to
Mhm.
go and show that they are HIV positive so that they can be prayed for. Because if you don't bring for some of the prophets,
They will not.
they will not pray for you.
Yeah, I'm glad I have a practitioner here with me. Anyway, thank you. Those are questions, interactions, so far so good. It's still a work in progress. We still have to talk to now the healthcare providers as the third phase, and then sit now and look at these three perspectives. What can we do? What intervention as implementation scientists can we come or can we design? And I'm thinking education of these pastors because they are all over the communities and kind of really do community related work where we go into these churches and even borrow some of their time and even speak to the churches and the pastors and the Christians themselves about the serious situation about HIV and the critical nature of taking medication. So maybe the good thing is that there are also Christian organizations where the pastors come together as an organization of pastors. So we plan to penetrate these arenas and kind of share the vision and so get buy-in from them so that we can probably get this. But that's the long-term vision. So far, this is where we're at. And I will keep updating the group as more work is being done, but yeah, this is where we're at. Reactions, questions?
Do you foresee like the like spiritual leaders, like there being pushback when you get into the implementation science aspect of it and try to share like this information with them? Like you foresee them being like, you know, this is you're teaching something that's against our teachings and kind of see that as like a threat almost to their.
Yes, I foresee that there is going to be pushback. I definitely foresee. I think that the advantage that at this point I have is because I know the Bible very well. I've read it almost 50 times back to back. Every year I start from the first book to the last book. And so I would know what scriptures to tell them to counteract their arguments.
I have one. You mentioned in phase 2 or something, it was like the integrated study you were doing where you take people who are HIV positive, members of the church, go to prayer every day and you talk to them.
Yeah.
I think it's similar, like they're probably gonna be very apprehensive of you guys, so how do you foresee, like, plan on convincing them to join?
I'm a part of the community. I know the Bible back to back. I'll tell you. I know these things.
Are
I know
you
what this
from
is.
South Africa?
I'm,
So it's like,
my friend. I'm from Cameroon, but I've stayed in South Africa for quite a bit. I think 15 odd years. Yeah.
so you're not like an outsider.
I don't know. Am I an insider or an outsider? I think both. Yes, I'm an insider outsider. And I do have South African pastor friends that I've been able to not convince, but who share my similar beliefs and kind of use them like gatekeepers because it's very important for social sciences, especially community-based and participatory research approach, which is what we're trying to use here to get into these arenas. And it is born of this, my understanding that and my practice, and as a researcher that I started saying that there is a huge part that we're missing here. When we're only focusing on CD4 counts and viral loads and year in, year out, they go up, they go down, they go up. We set this different things to meet and all these wonderful interventions that we come up with. But if the people do not take their medication or the injection, because of their religious beliefs. We've been here, and we are still here when it comes to blood donation for Jehovah's Witness. Have we overcome it? No, we're still there. They would prefer to die than to have somebody's blood transfused into them. Tells you how important religious or spirituality is a component of humans. Yeah.
Thinking about what you were saying about talking with the pastors and the question about, will you get resistance or like, it occurred to me that this term interest convergence, right? So we meaning like scientists or healthcare workers have the interest of helping people stay healthy and stay alive, and figuring out what the pastor's interest is and figuring out where they overlap, right? What is their currency, right? What is the thing that's going to get them on board, right? It seems like it's maybe part of what you may be looking at as you go into the next phase.
Absolutely.
Study.
And you are on point there, because most of these healthcare workers, again, as you've seen, 85% are Christians. So most of these healthcare workers are also Christians themselves. And so they understand, they do go to church, they understand these dynamics as well. But then as healthcare providers, they also understand the scientific importance of antiretroviral therapy. Because they've been there, done that. They've seen that if this person does not take, this is what happens, irrespective of whether you go to church or not. And so they would offer us that critical balance between, and that's why I'm saying that the intervention should be an implementation science intervention where the healthcare workers are at the center, as well as the pastors or the head religious leaders. These two groups will be at the center of such an intervention, because now you can sell both sides of the coins. And it's nice because you also see people who are also saying that you can pray, but also take your medication. And so we want to use those aspects and to scaffold such an intervention where we're saying that we do know that your religious life is very important. Your spirituality, of course, we're not taking that away from you. But we also worry that you might die if you're not on treatment before this happens. And while you're waiting on God to show you that miracle, let's start with what the scientists have said.
Interesting to hear what the healthcare workers have to say.
I'm so looking forward to that, and I tell you why. Because I think that they're somewhere in the middle. I think the pastors are on this extreme, the Christians are on this extreme, and I think that the healthcare workers are somewhere in the middle, and I'm so looking forward to that phase of the study.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and your research is really an interesting aspect of the patient care. I am just talking from practice because one of the things I have observed is that religiosity and spirituality is really affecting adherence to medication. And what they need to do is really to educate both parties. Education of the religious leaders, as you have said, to understand that even though you are a believer and you know that God can heal, faith should not be assumption. Because that is what is actually helping the patient to stop taking medication. You did not assume that you had HIV. So you have to go back to the laboratory to let you know that you are HIV negative before you drop your medication. But that is not what is being preached or encouraged by the religious leaders. And so I have even in practice a mother who stopped taking medication and also stopped the child from taking medication with the fact that they are spiritually healed. And so we had to bring together religious leaders, and they were diverging.
Of course, as you can see.
Ideas. Some were for it. Some said, okay, God can heal 100%. But then as healthcare provider, our position was like, we are not denying your faith that God can heal, but while you're praying, let the patient be taking medication until maybe when you shall do your PCR and it's discovered that you are not HIV positive. That way you are able to convince the client to stay in care. Otherwise, they abandon their medication.
Now, this perspective you've shared is what we want our healthcare providers to have.
Yeah, so that is the way.
This is the mindset that we want our healthcare providers to have. going or dealing with Christian, and I'm thinking that not only Christianity, the overlap in this is that when you are counseling somebody, you get to know them, their religiosity a little bit, and ask them, is there a way this can affect your taking medication? Is there a way that it can be a barrier? And how can we work around this?
Have you,
Yes, go ahead.
Now that you're talking about providers talking, when they're counseling, they talk about religiosity of the client. Do you think that this is something that can be incorporated in the guidelines for counselors, that when they're counseling, at least they talk about this?
That's my goal. That's where this entire project is leading to. Yeah, because it's missing, and the whole point is missing is because we as scientists do not think that people's spirituality is part of who they are. But as we're hearing all the stories, it's a central part of who they are. It's their daily living. Some people, nah, not really, but 85% of people claim that they are Christians. Of course, not practicing Christians. But we'll see amongst this 85%, we'll see maybe about 50% or even less. But if they are HIV positive, you've heard the stories from her, and I have tons of them, and that's what actually influenced me getting to this topic, because I've really been opportune to even speak to healthcare providers. This came to another study, my PhD study, when I was looking at adherence to antiretroviral therapy through adherence clubs. So in spite of what these adherence clubs were trying to do, counseling about learning what HIV is and what that is, you go to church and your pastor tells you different. You go and learn, in the healthcare provider tells you it's a small virus transmitted sexually. You go, your pastor says, no, this is from the pit of hell. It's demonic. And then now you've seen that these pastors wield bigger power. And so they tend to believe their pastor more than they would believe you, the healthcare provider. And you are sitting there like, oh my goodness.
I just also want to say
you
that.
before then you.
Okay.
well, you said this is the first of kind of like the first of its kind.
Yeah.
So is there any other examples like internationally where this has happened, where you've seen, because religion is a big thing internationally, and I was thinking like, I'm from India, so I know that they have problems with that there.
Yeah.
Where you've seen other examples of religion adhering people from getting their medication, have you like kind of seen like what they've tried to do?
That's an interesting question. Not really. I think I'll focus in Africa, but I think that they can definitely confirm.
Big in Africa.
There we
I
go.
interviewed a participant who was talking about religion interfering with his medication adherence, because his pastor was saying that he can be healed, out of his HIV without taking medication. So, like I had to come in and be a counselor.
Yeah. And it helps that the counselor is knowledgeable about that religion.
Yeah.
It helps. You tell them, for example, if you are diagnosed of having cancer, you ask them, don't you go for cancer treatment? Even if the pastor also will tell you that I have undergone treatment of some kind, an operation. For some strange reason, they will see an operation, surgical operation, differently from how they'll perceive antiretroviral therapy. So if I fall, for example, and I have a broken limb, and I go, an orthopedic surgeon organizes it and puts it together, and then we come to church, then they will now pray for total healing. But the first part of whatever was done medically. And so you use examples like that to kind of shed light into them.
Yeah.
But they will still believe that whatever happened to them before the fall was demonic. Don't get me wrong.
It's just interesting because these are things that occur daily.
That's why I'm saying that I'm surprised it's not really in the main literature.
People hear about it in the media all the time. But the thing is that it's about control. So leaders also want vote from these people. They look on the other side. But I'm glad that you're looking at it. It's something that anyone who has lived in low resource setup in Africa will tell you, because people cry on this. Like politicians politicians benefit from it.
So much.
Yeah, and it cuts across beyond just HIV. It is a way people are given alternative diet, alternative medication, and part of the control is that the miracles will not work if you are going to mix them with.
And you know what I'm saying? I remember I mentioned that.
So it's part of the control.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. If you actually put it scientifically, which makes a lot of sense, their control as Christians is that they don't want you to come tomorrow and say that it's because of the medication that they became healed. So they tend to stop you from using the medication, so that if you become healed, they now say, this is the power of God.
And then
So you not being on medication is the control, just like we also do it scientifically.
And then, like, if it is the power from God from this particular pastor.
That is an important part.
Huge
Following.
Yeah.
And then the huge following comes with financial security. Because now they start receiving tithes, they start receiving gifts in financial terms. So that's why he said it's a very complex dynamics, which I intend to unpack slowly.
It doesn't have some things happen in darkness, but most of it happen on live TV every day.
On live TV, there are a lot of Christian TV stations doing this inverted commas, open and closed miracles.
Yeah.
The reason why I put inverted commas, open and closed is because there are so many instances where they have hired actors to come and pose as if they were lame or blind or what have you. And then they were healed and the cameras are like, praise the Lord. And then now they leave from a tent to a very huge hall, because they now say, God has given me a vision that we should contribute to build a sentinel or a temple for him, and the money trickles in, and then the next day they have this.
It's like the televangelist here.
That's exactly what it is. That's what I was showing. That's it. It's part of the culture.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's why I said it varies in levels. Televangelist, that's part of the culture. But this is at the local level and exploiting now these local people, and they're having real issues. That is not really taken.
And I forgot to ask my real question. Are you getting funny to do this work?
I know, like I said, no.
Yeah, because like people.
Now you're getting it. Now you're getting it. Who's going to fund this? They want to see p-values and viral load measurements and all that for them to believe this.
They want a biological outcome.
But however, this is a real thing. As social beings, that's why I'm saying that somebody who tells you it's forgetfulness, but it is not. They did not forget. She has even said it here. She has a Christian who comes and tells you, every month I have to go off my medication for 3 days just because she was open to them.
And I think that we can go a step further by maybe looking into all the laws to follow up. And then do a quantitative study on them to see a percentage of
who are Christian.
They drop out of medication because they were prayed for, and because they do exist.
Yeah.
There is, I'm a part of CFAR, Center for AIDS Research, and there is a inter-CFAR, because there are 19 CFARs across the country, so there's an inter-CFAR, working group on faith and spirituality.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're asking the question about funding. I was thinking maybe that group might have some ideas about.
Yes, if
how
you can.
to fund. There is a meeting in Nashville, and I think it's in October.
If you can email me that, I can even go and attend with this work. And I'm like, I'm funding this off my salary. and I am just an assistant professor.
CFAR has a trainee support grant that could fund this sort of at your attendance to the meetings.
Okay, please email me those details, and I would really like to take this further.
I think they'd be really interested in this one.
See, that's why it's good to
Okay,
present.
we are at time.
Yes.
So thank you everyone who joined online, and thank you everyone who attended in person. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.